I never imagined that a silly outfit would be the cause of the dissolution of my marriage, yet here we are. Hello, my name is Roxy, and I am 28 years old. I am still trying to figure out how everything came to an end so quickly. Antonio was unable to accept the fact that I had a life outside of being his wife, which resulted in the dissolution of our marriage after 3 years of marriage. It was as if I awoke one morning and suddenly became aware that I had been gradually vanishing inside. This box that he had constructed for me, this ideal, unassuming, and quiet little woman who does not draw attention to herself, is a perfect example. At a gathering held on a rooftop 4 years ago, we first met. In those days, Antonio was unable to tear his gaze away from me while I was wearing my tight red dress and platform heels. He admired my self-assurance and the way I could enter into a room and make it brighter than it was before. He was relentless in his pursuit of me, sending me texts on a regular basis, surprising me with weekend vacations and assuring me that I was unlike any other woman he had ever encountered. The proposal arrived in a hurry, only 8 months after we had first met. In retrospect, perhaps that ought to have been a warning sign from the beginning, but at the time, it seemed romantic. I was so unaffected by the changes that I hardly noticed them. In the beginning, there were some comments made about my clothing. When it comes to having dinner with my employer, don't you think that's a touch excessive? You may also say that that dress is a little too short for someone's wife. That's your opinion. Because I didn't want to create a conflict, I would reconsider. It was then that I was confronted with inquiries regarding who I was texting, why I needed to go out with the girls so frequently, and why I put particular photographs on the internet. For the sake of maintaining peace, I continued to reduce the size of my world while he continued to find new things to criticize. It was expected that we would be putting money down for a house, but it seems that the main reason we were unable to afford one was because of my shopping. Ignore the fact that he had to purchase pricey golf clubs or the fishing boat that he had to have because his friend was selling it at a low price. And further weapon was the debt incurred via credit cards. There is a possibility that we would have a down payment by now if he did not require a new outfit every weekend. At the same time, he would arrive at his house carrying a bottle of whiskey that cost $300 and act as if it were a financial investment. When Antonio began to travel more for work, things began to deteriorate at a rapid pace. I would receive calls from him at arbitrary intervals, and if I did not answer them right away, I would be subjected to a questioning on my location and the people I was with. In the event that I posted anything when he was away, he would scrutinize every single detail. When was the photograph taken? When did you decide to wear that? This individual in the backdrop is a mystery to me. It wore me out completely. It had been 3 months since my last girls' night, and it was due to take place on Friday. They had been pleading with me to come out, stating that they hardly knew me anymore. Jade and Tatum had called me. For a night, I was really looking forward to putting on some clothes, having a few drinks, and forgetting about having to walk on eggshells. I was delighted to feel like myself again. I knew that Antonio would despise this black dress that I had purchased some months ago but had never worn before, so I grabbed it out of my closet. The front was low cut, and it reached the middle of the thigh. It was attractive, but it was not overly indecent in any way. While I was applying my makeup, Antonio arrived home from work earlier than expected. Even before he spoke a word, I realized that his eyes were piercing me with their intensity. Have you reached the end of that? The tone of his voice was that of someone who appears to be calm, but has a hint of apprehension that indicates he has already determined that I am incorrect. I tried to keep my tone light as I went on to say that it was nothing more than cocktails with the girls. Where is it? Are you at a nightclub for strippers? He was not even making an effort to conceal his disdain. Which issue are you having? Even though I was aware of what was going to happen, I still asked at the same time that he was crossing his arms. He stated, "My problem is that my wife is dressing like she's single and looking for attention." Does that happen to be the topic at hand? Would you like to be noticed by other guys? Simply because that is precisely what is going to take place when you wear that dress. Just now, something inside of me cracked. There are numerous minor concessions. When I would change my clothes, cancel my plans, or erase posts because they made him feel uncomfortable, I would do all of these things. It was as if a tsunami was coming up on us all at once. I don't care if someone takes notice of me. Is it really so miserable? Is it expected of me that for the rest of my life, I will remain invisible to everyone else but you? That is not what I meant to say. When I called Antonio out immediately, he responded by making a little retreat, which was his standard tactic. Simply said, "I believe that married women ought to have some dignity and some respect for themselves. This dress is getting the wrong type of attention that it should be getting." As I completed putting my lipstick, which was a strong red color that I knew would push him even further, I turned back to the mirror and finished applying it. It's possible that I'm looking for attention. Could it be that I'm weary of having the sensation that I'm vanishing? When we looked at one another in the mirror, I noticed that he had a look of danger cast across his face. In a low voice, he suggested, "So you're admitting it. Specifically, you are wearing in a way that attracts the attention of other males." For some reason, I was suddenly frantic to go any place other than there, so I grabbed my phone and handbag. I told him that I was dressing for attention, and he told me that I would tell the females later. I then departed for girls' night after saying, "Well, it's not for you," and then I left. On the other hand, what I actually said was more offensive. At the time, when I looked him in the eyes, I added, "At least someone might actually see me." I looked him dead in the eyes, as I was leaving. I slammed the door behind me and texted Jade while my hands were shaking. "I am currently on my way. Tonight we require additional shots." A text message from Antonio began before I had even arrived at my vehicle. "Roxy, you are a really mature person. We are not yet finished discussing this topic. Do not anticipate that I will be waiting up." In an effort to drown out the voice in my head that was warning me that every dispute like this was growing worse, and that we were saying things that we couldn't take back, I turned up the volume of the music in my car. However, I choose to ignore it. Tonight was not about my marriage that was falling apart. The purpose of tonight was to be reminded of the person I was before I became Antonio's wife, and I was resolved to enjoy myself regardless of the circumstances. As I approached Luke's lounge, I saw Jade and Tatum waiting outside. I entered the establishment. The moment they laid eyes on my clothing, their eyes opened. The return of Roxy is a miracle. As she pulled me into a hug, Jade let out a squeal. "Is it true that Antonio allowed you to leave the house in such a manner?" Tatum inquired, just partly joking about it. I gave a sigh of relief. "No, I do not require his authorization. And just now, we got into a major argument about it. So hurry up and get some liquids into me, shall we?" Within the establishment, the music was pulsating, and Tatum promptly placed an order for tequila shots. To Roxy's successful escape from jail. We raised our glasses in a salute, and Jade toasted. The ringer on my phone. One more text message from Antonio. "Do tell me where you are at the very least." The device was quiet, and I stuffed it into my purse. "Is he taking your phone to the next level already?" Inquiring while looking over my shoulder, Tatum asked, "Do you realize how controlling he is?" "Kevin would never do that." I responded, "You have no idea," as I felt the tequila warming my chest more and more. He commented that I was dressing for attention tonight, and he meant it literally. To put it another way, what century does he have? Jade let out a snort. "Are we talking about the same century in which he is able to go on business trips every other week while you are able to stay at home?" "I beg you." My suspicions regarding those travels had not been communicated to them. If you were to speak it out loud, it would somehow make it more real. As soon as I took 3 photographs, I began posting selfies without giving them too much thought for. The very first time in an eternity. There's no need to analyze angles in order to ensure that my attire appeared decent enough. There's no doubt that Antonio would consider the caption to be excessively flirtatious. Just me having a fantastic time, looking great, and not caring who would see me doing it. Tatum continued to include me in her narrative, which included pictures of us smiling and dancing together. At almost midnight, Jade said loudly in my ear, "Don't look now, but that guy at the bar has been staring at you for approximately 20 minutes. Stop looking at him." When I turned around, I noticed that a tall man with sandy hair and a button-up shirt was paying attention to me. In response to our gaze meeting, he smiled rather than averting his gaze. It was something about his self-assurance that caused my stomach to turn. He was adorable, I must confess. As Tatum pressed, he went to talk to him. Simply put, it's speaking. I was hesitant since I could feel the weight of my wedding ring on my finger. "Don't forget that I'm married." The eyes of Jade rolled, and it is likely that your husband is currently at home, using a magnifying glass to search through your drawer of underwear options. Enjoy yourself. You are deserving of it. Simply go and say hello. Perhaps it was the tequila. Perhaps it was the fact that I was still harboring resentment against Antonio. Or perhaps it was simply the excitement of having someone stare at me as if I were desirable. Once more, but I found myself walking over. "My name is Roxy." I introduced myself as I slid onto the bar stool next to him. He responded with a Bradley, his eyes running over my garment in a gesture of appreciation. "Can I purchase a drink for you?" Our discussion flowed quickly, and we ended up having 2 drinks instead of just one. Bradley, who worked in finance and had a dry sense of humor, did not inquire as to the reason I was spending time away from my husband, despite the fact that I had said that I was married. Rather than that, He paid close attention to what I had to say, laughed at my jokes, and made me feel like the most intriguing lady in the room. The moment Jade and Tatum arrived to inform me that they were leaving, I gave them a wave and then left. I said, ignoring their meaningful glances, that I would get an Uber once I got some time later. Bradley moved in closer as the bar began to empty out of patrons. He made the suggestion that we may continue our conversation at my apartment, and his hand lightly touched mine. It doesn't matter. I have better alcohol than this establishment. A caution bell rang somewhere in my hazy consciousness, but it was overpowered by his scent, the lingering anger at Antonio, and the voice whispering that I deserved to be wanted. I was unable to hear the warning bell. I heard myself say, "Let's go," and I concurred. The apartment that Bradley occupied was modern and uncluttered. First and foremost, Bachelor Pad 101. He poured us cocktails that were more potent than I had anticipated, and he played certain playlists that were dominated by bass and contained lyrics that were suggestive. I was well aware of the direction in which this was going, and a deep-seated voice within me was yelling for me to get an Uber and head back home. The more vocal portion, on the other hand, the half that was fueled by tequila and defiance, simply desired to experience anything other than being dominated. The first person to kiss the other is a mystery to me. It was all a whirlwind of hands and lips, and I was finally getting the affirmation that I had been looking for. At a certain point in time, my dress fell off. At a certain point in time, I completely detached myself from thinking about Antonio. In my head, which was overflowing with alcohol. This wasn't really cheating. Taking back something that had been taken away from me, such as my independence, my desirability, and my power, was the result of this. For a moment, I was completely unaware that Bradley was reaching for his phone. He had already begun recording by the time I arrived. "What exactly are you doing?" While we were still engaged in our activities, I inquired. He said this with a smirk that ought to have been a warning sign, but instead he was memorializing the event. Rather than that, I found myself acting in a manner that I had never done before with Antonio, which was to play to the camera. "Your husband is aware of what he is lacking, right?" While looking intently at my face, Bradley inquired. I responded unequivocally while staring straight at the camera. However, he was able to. Alcohol was the one doing the talking at this point. With the hurt and fury coming together to make a poisonous mixture of revenge fantasy, "Are you requesting that I send it to him?" Bradley inquired, his tone indicating that it was a joke. Yet, his finger was hovering over the send button after I had foolishly given him Antonio's number earlier when I was grumbling about his texts. I still find it hard to comprehend that I was responsible for what took place after that. "What are your plans for sending it to him?" My voice was slightly slurred, but it was clear enough for the microphone to catch up on my question. Bradley did a chuckle. "Do I need to?" And then I found myself laughing as well, a laugh that was both wild and destructive as I reached for the phone. Before the more sensible portion of my brain could try to interfere, I said, "Watch this," and then I pushed the send button. There was a moment when the magnitude of what I had just accomplished was completely overshadowed by the activities that we were engaged in. When I woke up, my head was all over the place and my mouth was very dry. It took me a few seconds to recall where I was when I caught a glimpse of sunlight coming in through blinds that I had never seen before. Bradley was still sleeping, with one arm draped over the pillow, and my dress was crumpled on the floor along with my panties. Then, like a freight train, the memories came flooding back to me, including the fact that I had sent the film to Antonio. This is my phone. What happened to my phone? My handbag was lying on the ground, and I rummaged through it while my hands were shaking. 47 calls that were not answered. There are 23 texts. There are 3 voicemails. "Please do not return home," as stated in the most recent text message. My chest was filled with panic. Where did I go wrong? As I struggled to keep from throwing up from the mixture of my hangover and my fear, I grabbed my clothing and got dressed. In Bradley's bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and tried not to throw up. Not Bradley was awakened by me. Nobody had anything to say about it. I sneaked out of the room and got an Uber, hoping that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't as horrible as I remembered it being. On the other hand, when the Uber drove away, images of my own face appearing on the video rushed through my mind. The video that I had given to my husband was not just a video of me cheating on him. It was also a video of me teasing him with it. However, I couldn't even find fault with Bradley. I would submit it on my own. The driver of the Uber continued looking back at me in the rearview mirror, most likely wondering why someone wearing the clothing she had worn the night before was sobbing quietly in his backseat at 10 o'clock in the morning. Saturday's the day. It was a possibility that I would ask him to take me somewhere other than home, such as to Jade's, to my mother's, or to a hotel. I was aware that I needed to confront Antonio. Would you mind if I explained? It is possible that I could assert that the video was fabricated or that I had been drugged. Even though I was in a state of terror, I was aware that those were lies that he would never believe. When the Uber arrived, our apartment complex appeared to be perfectly normal, which was unsettling. Garcia brought her pooch out for a walk. Within the parking lot, the Henderson children were seen riding their bicycles. Had they been aware? Are they aware that Antonio had been yelling at such a high volume? Who had he shown the footage to, if anyone? At the mere thought of it, my stomach churned once more. While I was at the door, I struggled with my keys and rehearsed apologies that, even in my thoughts, sounded like they were made up. As soon as I finally opened the door, I anticipated that it would be severely damaged. Everything was shattered, including photos, but everything was oddly intact. Things were flung. Antonio was gazing at the wall while he sat on our couch, still dressed in the clothing he had worn the day before. When I walked in, he did not look up at me. My voice was shaking as I began to speak. Antonio, I truly apologize. I was intoxicated. My mind was not working. When you called Uber, did you let them know where you were coming from? The tone of his voice was eerily calm when he interrupted. What is it? I was wondering what address you provided when you placed the Uber order this morning, and it was from his place. I was completely taken aback by my response to the question. Do I? Instinctively, I lied to him and said that I was at the residence of my friend Jade. At that moment, Antonio finally turned his gaze toward me, his eyes rimmed with red yet icy. So you're continuing to lie, in spite of everything that has happened. You continue to stand there and lie to my face. Not at all. I started, but he interrupted me by bringing up his phone and displaying my own Uber receipt, which had been transferred to his email in some way, most likely from the account that we both use. It made it quite evident that Bradley's address was the location of the pickup. Roxy, are you aware of the time that I first received that video? Inquiring as he gently stood up, he questioned. 2:34 a.m. I'd been sleeping. I was awakened by the buzzing of my phone, and I thought that perhaps there was an urgent matter with your mother or something. In its place, I was able to observe my wife. It was impossible for him to even utter the words. And are you aware of the most terrible aspect of it? While you were laughing, you were gazing directly into the camera, because you wanted me to see it. I admitted in a feeble voice that I was intoxicated. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. You said my name in the video. He yelled out in a startling manner, which caused me to jump. You went on to say that you were going to email it to me specifically. You despise me to that extent, Roxy? Can you tell me what I did to deserve that? My mascara began to run down my cheeks as I began to cry. I felt as though I was being suffocated by you since you were controlling me, condemning everything I wore, questioning everything I did, and going wherever I went. Simply put, I desired to have a night of complete freedom. Antonio looked at me as if I were a really unusual person, that I'm to blame for this. Is it because I didn't like the way you dressed that you made the decision to cheat on me and humiliate me? He laughed with a sour tone. What if I told you? Tell yourself that over and over again. Whatever it is that allows you to sleep at night. As he approached the entrance, he reached out and grabbed a duffel bag that I had not detected earlier. You can find me at my brother's house. A lawyer has already been contacted by me. It is imperative that you vacate this apartment by the end of the month on my end. Please, Antonio, I pleaded with him while clutching his arm. The situation can be resolved by us. Counseling is available to us. He shook his hand away from me as if my touch had caused him pain. What are you going to do? Roxy, there is no way to get through this situation. You are not the mate that I chose to marry. To be honest, I have no idea who you are. He started by opening the door, and then he made one final turn back. I also wanted to let you know that I showed the movie to my brother so that he could comprehend the reason I'm leaving. Therefore, you should anticipate that everyone is aware of the true nature of the person you are. Following that, he vanished, leaving the door slammed shut behind him. I was sobbing so hard that I could hardly breathe when I finally slumped on the floor. Things did not turn out the way they were supposed to. It is true that I had acted irresponsibly. Yet, Antonio was obligated to stand up for me and try to understand how his actions had brought me to this point. Unfortunately, he had already left, leaving me to deal with the repercussions of my actions on my own. While I was crying, I contacted Jade, and I was barely able to form sentences on my phone. He is no longer there. I was successful in escaping. He is going to divorce me. She made a hasty approach, taking Tatum along with her, even after I informed them of what had occurred, which included not just the cheating, but also the film and the planned sending of it. They appeared really surprised. Jade said with enormous eyes, "Holy shit, Rox. It's true that we urged you to enjoy yourself, but I know I shed a tear right then. It is a terrible thing. When I was so intoxicated, my mind was not working. Tatum was taking a look at her phone and reading through it when she suddenly became uneasy. If I may inquire, Roxy, did Marco, Antonio's brother, Upload the film to any website? My body went into a coma. What is it? That is not the case. Despite this, Tatum displayed her phone. This is what a cheating whore looks like, was the description that was attached to a post that was made by Marco. The post did not include the video itself, but rather a screenshot of my face that was plainly stolen from them. Better treatment was due to my brother. Tatum remarked in a low voice that it had already received approximately 50 comments. People are passing it around. Complete humiliation had been inflicted. Within a few hours, my phone was flooded with calls, not from Antonio, but from other individuals, with my mother inquiring about the situation. Some of my coworkers who followed me on social media sent me texts expressing their concern. Yes, even my boss. By Monday, we need to have a conversation. Not a single one of my calls or texts was being answered by Antonio. Everywhere I went, his brother had blocked me as well. I wanted to get in touch with Antonio, so I tried to create new accounts, but he blocked those as well. I had no input into the narrative as it was being constructed. The bad guy, the cheater, and the person who ruined the house was me. Nobody was talking about how controlling Antonio had been, how he had gradually undermined my self-esteem, or how a single night of weakness should not be enough to erase 3 years of marriage. During that particular night, Jade and Tatum stayed with me, taking turns staying with me while I alternated between having panic attacks and drinking whatever booze we could find throughout the apartment. In spite of Jade's repeated assurances, her eyes continued to convey a different message. This wasn't the kind of thing that would simply disappear into thin air. I was terminated from my position by email on Sunday evening for engaging in conduct that was not in accordance with the ideals of the organization. It appears that the video was able to find its way to the place where I work. I had already been withdrawn from the joint bank account that Antonio and I shared. Following Marco's sending of the screenshot to my parents, they stopped communicating with me directly. Because of a one foolish and intoxicated choice, my entire life was falling apart before my very eyes. While Jade and I were sitting on the floor of my kitchen, passing a bottle of wine back and forth, I told her that I couldn't believe he was just going to throw away our marriage in such a way. Her expression was one of both sorrow and exasperation as she looked at me after everything that we had been through together. Roxy, you sent him a video of you with another man from your phone. What were you anticipating? At the very least, I anticipated that he would communicate with me, I remarked, my rage rising to the surface of the misery. To make an effort to comprehend the reasons behind my actions, Jade sighed. In the event that the roles were switched, would you? Because I knew it on some level, I refrained from responding. In the event that Antonio had sent me a film of himself with another lady, he would have been intentionally tormenting me, and I would not have been interested in comprehending his reasoning. Exactly like he was, I would be finished. As the entire burden of what I had lost began to sink over me, I perused the old photographs that were stored on my mobile device. Taking stupid selfies at home, going on vacation, and our wedding. How had we arrived at this point from that point? The saddest part was being aware that I had damaged something that I could not get back because I had done it in a moment of drunken resentment. This includes not only my marriage, but also my reputation, my work, and the ties I have with my family and friends. And despite my tears and my regrets, a small voice that was unwilling to give up continued to whisper, but I was forced to do this by him. Should he not have been so dominating, this would not have taken place at any point. Actually, it wasn't my fault at all. I was unable to fully grasp the fact that I was the architect of my own downfall. Even though my life was on the verge of falling apart around me,